Friends, we're all back together for the next episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Welcome.
Hi, my name's Theresa, and I have a daughter who is almost 14 years old with type 1 diabetes, who was diagnosed back in December of 2020.
Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. AG1 is offering my listeners a free $76 gift when you sign up. You'll get a welcome kit, a bottle of D3K2, and 5 free travel packs in your first box. So make sure you check out drinkag1.com/juicebox to get this offer. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. I'd love it if you would go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox and take the survey. When you complete that survey, your answers are used to move type 1 diabetes research of all kinds. So if you'd like to help with type 1 research, but don't have time to go to a doctor or an investigation, t1dexchange.org/juicebox. It should not take you more than about 10 minutes. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense 365, the 1-year wear CGM. That's one insertion a year. That's it. And here's a little bonus for you. How about there's no limit on how many friends and family you can share your data with the Eversense Now app. No limits. Eversense. Today's episode is sponsored by the Tandem Mobi system with Control IQ Plus technology. If you are looking for the only system with auto bolus, multiple wear options, and full control from your personal iPhone, you're looking for Tandem's newest pump and algorithm. Use my link to support the podcast, tandemdiabetes.com/juicebox. Check it out.
Hi, my name's Theresa, and I have a daughter who is almost 14 years old with type 1 diabetes, who was diagnosed back in December of 2020.
Oh, wow. That's 4 years ago.
Almost to the day. Her diaversary was just this past Sunday.
Wow. Did you set it up on purpose for the recording to be near that?
I didn't. No. That was your first available when I emailed you.
Happens all the time, by the way.
Huh.
I'm always thrown by it. People are like, oh, my diversary was yesterday or my birthday's today. And I'm like, did you do this on purpose? And they go, no, I don't think so. I'm like, oh, okay.
Right.
4 years ago, she was 10 at that point?
She was about to be 10. She turned 10 in January right after her diagnosis.
Okay. Well, how did you figure out she had diabetes?
Well, so COVID was weird, of course. Everything was shut down and, she was home. She started complaining of blurry eyes. So she said things would get blurry and then things at night in her room, weird as it is, she said would get bigger and then smaller. I'm like, what is going on? So I, took her to the eye doctor and they did a routine eye exam because she had no history. She doesn't wear glasses. She, has always had normal eye checks and it was normal. So I thought, okay. And she's always really been like my dramatic child. So there's something wrong with this kid every day. Every day there's something new that hurts or aches or something. So we don't put too much thought into it. However, being her eyes, I was like, okay, let's take care of this. But that wasn't it. She then was having some accidents, but, looking back, of course, it makes all this sense. But at the time, it was always when she was playing outside and she had to go and didn't make it inside. But, we were 9 years old at this point. So that was getting kind of odd. And in October that year, she went on a camping trip with my husband and she had an accident in the middle of the night. And he's like, that's really weird. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Things progressed really fast from like the end of October to the beginning of December when she was diagnosed to where the thirst was just insane. So my husband did some Googling and he's like, maybe we should take her in to the pediatrician. So I took her in and I took her in by myself. And he did a urine test and he came back in the room and he's, of course, gave the speech of, don't freak out, but, she has type 1 diabetes and you need to go home and you need to pack a bag and you need to go straight to the hospital. And of course I'm freaking out. And it happened to be, my daughter had a snow day. So that day, and I'm like, well, let's just go to the doctor today because we have off because I'm a teacher also. she's like, you ruined my snow day. So that's her story of story of diagnosis is my mom ruined my first snow day of the year.
Why'd you do that? It's horrible.
Right. It was so terrible. But, it was very scary. The doctor was somewhat reassuring because he's like, my wife has type 1. So, it's going to be okay. But, when someone tells you to go straight to the ER and pack a bag, like, I thought she was dying. Like, I thought she was dying right then and there. And I'm like, holy crap.
It's my favorite part of those stories, by the way, Theresa. Yeah. Like, don't panic. But run home, grab everything you need to stay alive, and immediately go to the emergency room.
Exactly. Yes. And you're going to be there for several days. So I'm like, what?
But don't
what
panic.
Is happening?
Please don't panic.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, I took her to the children's hospital. We're in Ohio. We have a really good children's hospital in the area. And took her there, and they were great, but it all happens so fast, and there's so much information that it's kind of a blur looking back. I think they gave me good information, but you got home and you're just panic stricken. I mean, my life everything just stopped. So it was pretty traumatizing for everyone, I think, but we figured it out somehow.
In 2 days, you're the second person to say to use those words. Like, my kid was diagnosed and everything else stopped.
Oh, everything just stopped on a dime. And I've always been a working mom. I'm a teacher. I used to teach preschool. Then I actually taught in my daughter's school system when it happened. So that was somewhat comforting of like, I contacted the school, that kind of took care of me and her for excuses of being absent or whatever. But it was just, time just stopped for like, I would say a good week looking back on it. And nothing else mattered. I felt so bad for my older daughter because it was just like, sorry, can't do you right now. Your sister needs me. So felt super guilty about that. But yeah, time just, it just stopped that day.
Isn't it funny too, how we, in the course of a regular day, will say, I don't have time to do that. I can't make time to do that. But when something really shows you there's no option, you make time and everything's fine afterwards.
Right. The world kept going. Right. Nobody needed me for that week. Yeah. Everybody survived.
Turns out you're not the only reason the company is working.
Exactly.
I'm not talking directly to my wife right now, just in case you're wondering.
Oh, that's okay.
There's an opportunity there to look back and to have a moment where you say, oh, maybe I can give myself a little more leeway throughout my days.
Oh, yeah.
When someone says, hey, your kid's got to go to the emergency room, all of a sudden, everything else you thought was super important doesn't matter. It's a perspective shift.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to be working from home at that time, too. I was the lucky teacher that got to be virtual that year. I taught reading intervention K-4, and I was just doing it virtually. So looking back, everything happened for a reason. Right before her diagnosis, I had left a job that I had been at for 17 years, and I'm a creature of habit. Like, I never want to change jobs ever. And I just so happened that, an opportunity presented itself and I changed. And my first thought at diagnosis is, this is what you get for changing jobs. That's my rationale for it. Because, I didn't know my bosses real well yet. I didn't have a rapport with them. I'd only been there 2 months.
I see.
And now all of a sudden I'm like, I need a week off. My life has fallen apart.
They're like, oh, great. We hired one of those.
Exactly. Yeah. I was that person at that moment. And at my previous job, I was an administrator of a pretty large preschool. And, I managed all these staff and had all these people that called off all the time. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm that person now.
I really appreciate this job. I'm super excited to get started. Can I just get a month off?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it was pretty crazy.
Right.
But, we left the hospital and we left without a Dexcom. They didn't really push it. We Googled real quick. And so we brought it up like, what's this Dexcom thing? And they're like, oh, yeah, we could get you started on that, but it's really expensive. So you're going to need to figure out like your insurance situation first. So I called the insurance, and of course it takes forever. And, generally before this, we were a pretty healthy household. So we had not met our deductible, and it was December. Like, we hadn't even dented our deductible. And so it was, do I order this and have to pay completely out of pocket for it? Or do I wait and deal and get everything squared away in the new year? So we opted to wait, not knowing like what information we were missing out on.
Yeah.
So we actually did finger sticks from December 2020 till the end of April of 2021. So about 5-6 months. And boy, if I could rewind time, that would be what I changed for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They always tell you you're going to learn something by doing it the old-fashioned way. Did you learn anything? Let's talk about the Tandem Mobi insulin pump from today's sponsor, Tandem Diabetes Care. Their newest algorithm, Control IQ Plus technology, and the new Tandem Mobi pump offer you unique opportunities to have better control. It's the only system with auto bolus that helps with missed meals and preventing hyperglycemia. The only system with a dedicated sleep setting, and the only system with off or on body wear options. Tandem Mobi gives you more discretion, freedom, and options for how to manage your diabetes. This is their best algorithm ever, and they'd like you to check it out at tandemdiabetes.com/juicebox. When you get to my link, you're going to see integrations with Dexcom sensors and a ton of other information that's going to help you learn about Tandem's tiny pump that's big on control. tandemdiabetes.com/juicebox. The Tandem Mobi system is available for people ages 2 and up who want an automated delivery system to help them sleep better, wake up in range, and address high blood sugars with auto bolus. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense 365. And just as the name says, it lasts for a full year. Imagine for a second a CGM with just one sensor placement and one warm-up period every year. Imagine a sensor that has exceptional accuracy over that year and is actually the most accurate CGM in the low range that you can get. What if I told you that this sensor had no risk of falling off or being knocked off? That may seem too good to be true, but I'm not even done telling you about it yet. The Eversense 365 has essentially no compression lows. It features incredibly gentle adhesive for its transmitter. You can take the transmitter off when you don't want to wear your CGM and put it right back on without having to waste the sensor or go through another warm-up period. The app works with iOS and Android, even Apple Watch. You can manage your diabetes instead of your CGM with the Eversense 365. Learn more and get started today at eversensecgm.com/juicebox. 1 year, 1 CGM.
I learned I had no idea what I was doing. Not being able to see after you eat what happens because, she's new to this too. So like, I didn't want to stick her finger every 5 minutes.
Right.
Like, with the Dexcom. So, we were always reacting because you could never be proactive without a CGM. It was just, I'm reacting to what that number said and what she's about to intake. And we'll hope it all works out in a couple hours and we'll see where we're at. So that was very frustrating because I'm definitely like a control freak in a lot of areas. So always having to be on the reaction mode versus the, being proactive. So that was hard for me. But once we got that in place, it was like, holy cow, this whole new world of information. And then it became obsessive now that I have this information. And I had actually joined your Facebook group before getting a CGM. And I just kind of lurked in the background. And I actually left the group because I felt like everybody's doing this better than I am, like everybody. And so I couldn't take like the guilt as I would scroll through the page of like, look at all these perfect numbers and people are eating Olive Garden and people are eating pizza. And here I am, my kids eating like, everything that is carbless or low carb and just easy to control. And then actually after I got the CGM, I rejoined the group. And that's when I was like, oh, I can do this now. I can figure this out.
Can we dig a little more into that? Because I had an interesting moment this morning when I was setting up for you. And I thought, is this like a guest that's been on before? Because I really recognize your name, but from the past, it felt like. But then I looked and you were more recently in a post about like newly diagnosed people. And I was like, I got really confused. I was like, I don't understand what's happening, but that didn't occur to me. And what happened to you is not uncommon. We get a lot of people who are like, I don't know what to do. Someone suggested this, or, I was inundated online. 75 different people told me Juicebox Podcast. So I went and looked. Then I got there. I was overwhelmed. I left, but then I came back. But then I came back. I hear a lot. So yeah, go more into that.
Well, I was actually a part of some of the other groups online. I won't mention their names that aren't as active as yours, obviously, and doesn't reach the people you reach. I saw them banning posts with your podcast in it. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what am I missing? You know what I mean? Like it intrigued me more to go back. And that's actually what made me go back is like, why does this group hate this being mentioned so much?
I hope they don't hear this because they don't realize they're my secret weapon.
I bet. I mean, it was kind of crazy. It was like that name could not be mentioned. And, I saw that a few times. And I'm like, well, maybe I am missing out something. And now your group is really the only group I'm in or pay attention to anyways.
I'll have to tell you something. I don't know. How do I tell you this story without giving away more than I'm supposed to?
Oh.
I was involved with somebody who was speaking publicly somewhere. And in the audience stood up a person who railed against me. And this person who was speaking, I have a relationship with them. So this person in the crowd is railing against me in this public forum. And most people would think, oh my God, like that's going to ruin my relationship with this person, or people are going to think ill of me or something like that. I got a phone call later in the day from the person who was on stage. And they said, I have never been more sure of my affiliation with you until I saw how much that woman hated you.
Right.
And I thought he must really be doing something different for someone to dislike him that much. And I thought, wow, that's awesome. Like, I thank you for seeing that, first of all. The truth is this, right, is that, you know, there's a way things get done. It makes everybody comfortable. They don't seem to care if it actually works. It's just what the system or what society or whatever agrees is okay. And I think we all know that, generally speaking, what we all agree is like safe is generally not helpful. When those other Facebook groups say like, you can't post about Juicebox, I always assume it's one of two things. Either they're scared of just that tagline that came out of one of those episodes, like bold with insulin, which is, by the way, something I said in passing. It's not like it was a rule or something like that. But I said it in passing and people responded to it. Mm-hmm. And then they found value in it. And it's a thing that people have heard because it's something that works for people. Not because I made it up and I marketed it to the end of its life. It's out there because it was valuable. They either are scared of that idea and haven't actually listened to the podcast. If they would listen, they would see all I'm talking about is like using the right amount of insulin at the right time. I'm not making any grand pronouncements about anything. Or they just are trying to fence off the people that they've somehow gotten to come into their group and keep them there. Because I feel like the other thing is what they know for sure is if they leave their group and come to mine, they're not coming back. So like, I think it's like one of those, like, you know, opposite of if you love something, set it free. I think what they're saying is I've got numbers. If I let them go find out what they're saying at Juicebox, I'm not getting them back again. So, and that happened to you, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I didn't even listen to the podcast until after we had the CGM because I left the group because it was just overwhelming. And then once we had the CGM and I kind of started to figure out what was happening in between meal times and overnight and things like that, that's when I started listening. And I didn't start at number one. I started by like group recommendations for new listeners. And the numbers were kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
But the one episode that really hooked me in was the one where you talk about, I think it was the M&Ms. Mm-hmm. And like figuring out, like, if I eat one M&M, what does this do to my blood sugar? If I eat two, what does it do? And just process of elimination and just figuring out, you know, how long did this impact it? Why did it impact it? And that's kind of where I became obsessed with like figuring out what the food does and how to avoid those spikes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's far too often that we think more about how is the insulin impacting us when we should be thinking too about how is the food impacting us and how is the food impacting the insulin and how is the insulin impacting the food. Like it's not just as simple as like I counted my carbs and I did the math and then whatever happens and I throw it up to God. That's not what's going on. There's more going on than that. It's not that complicated. It turns out if you listen to it discussed on a podcast, it kind of melts into your head.
And I have to remind myself of that all the time because just the other day, she's turning 14 and she's eating random things without telling me. And she's she's almost completely independent, but she doesn't always come get the insulin pen and she'll eat a Jolly Rancher that's sitting in her room or whatever, but it's interesting to think of like, how can we reduce these spikes and still live normally where I'm not like patrolling her all the time? Because that's a real point of contentment in my household. It's like I'm overbearing and I need the control all the time and she's trying to figure it out. So I actually asked her to listen to some episodes too. And she begrudgingly, I think, listened to one or two. But I do think it helped her because I can see her making different doses depending on what she's eating and thinking more about the food and the impact. And, sometimes we have those terrible highs. I find myself going, what's going on? And then I just remember, like, just give her more insulin. Like, What are you doing staring at this number? Even though you gave her a couple units half hour ago or whatever, we're now 60 points higher. I can give more. And And I think that's where I was stuck for a long time, is that whole like 2-hour holding pattern of like, I gave insulin and I can't do anything about it for 2 more hours. And I was really stuck there for a long time. And then I was like, I treated it when it was 190. Well, now we're 260 and I'm still staring at it because it hasn't been, quote, 2 hours. And that's what really kind of changed how I managed it, was like, I don't have to wait that long. Does that make sense?
Also, the randomness of someone told you 2 hours. Sometimes people get told 3 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I've heard people have been told 6 hours. Wait 6 hours and then treat again.
6?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, it's the insulin action time, like generally speaking, probably lasts about 6 hours in your system. But, you don't want to stack. And then, of course you don't want to stack. But it's not stacking if you need it. That's bolusing. And,
right.
It's awesome. By the way, it's great that she begrudgingly listened, but that it actually was valuable for her.
I think so. She'll never admit it, but
No.
she heard it,
I mean, try to put yourself in her shoes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, your mom comes to you when you're 14 and says, I want you to go listen to this Lawrence Welk fella. Oh, wait, that's too old for you. Johnny Carson. Go listen to Johnny Carson. You're going to think it's hilarious. And he's going to watch it and you're going to be like, I don't know what these old people are talking about. I tried to show my son something from All in the Family last night. And I was trying to make the point about how, he's always running around talking about how freedom of speech is very important. And I'm happy he thinks that way. And I'm like, look at what you could watch on television in the 70s. And I played him a clip. He didn't even hear the content. He was just like, this sucks.
Right. The look of it just sucks.
They're just sitting there talking. And, I said, this is probably a cultural pivot point, this television show. And he's like, it sucks. So, and by the way, he agrees with what was being said inside of the clip. And he agrees that it's important for people to be able to speak and like this whole thing. But like, it just didn't look the way it was supposed to look to him.
Right.
Because of the way the world shined up for him, and it moves faster and, there's sound effects behind it and stuff like that. Your daughter is probably the same way. She's like, my mom gave me a podcast. I don't even know what a podcast is.
Oh, yeah.
And there was this old guy and he was talking about insulin and, oh my God, he doesn't even have diabetes. And yeah, but listen, tell her I agree with her.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, something came up and I said, I'm a pretty fun mom. And she's like, your idea of fun is listening to a podcast about diabetes.
You're not fun, like, lady. By the way, they're not fun either.
They're not.
No,
they're totally not
fun. This
fun.
is the first generation of kids that suck a little bit.
They do. They absolutely do. You're right.
They don't really do anything.
For sure.
They just talk to each other through text chains and laugh at memes and, say snarky shit about like their friends, but privately. Like, I don't know, like what, you know what I mean?
So she has a sister also that's 19. So I have another generation up of a daughter. She's a much better communicator and open-mindedness. And my younger one is just so much more closed off. And I see that more and more when I work with middle schoolers. They know everything and they're not even willing to like entertain ideas. They just know everything. Well, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, listen, I mean, every kid thinks they know everything. That's fine. I think I know a lot. I think the bigger problem for them is that they're being siloed, by what 14-year-olds agree with by their social media feeds.
True.
They get that reinforcement constantly of the thing I think is right because my shiny thing told me.
Right.
Yeah. So there's no reason to go wonder about anything else because the thing that I have in my hand, the magic box, it agrees with me all the time.
And it feeds me exactly what I want to see all the time.
Listen, the other day, my son said, I was thinking of getting a leather bag for work. My wife and I have been inundated with leather bag social media posts now.
Wow. Kind of crazy.
Never seen them before in my life. So if your kid's out there, having thoughts and listening to certain stuff, they're just going to get it fed back to them. But that's not why you came on the podcast, to figure out how corporate shills are controlling our children.
Right.
What did you want to come on and talk about?
Nothing really in particular. I think the biggest thing was that a lot of the Facebook group and somewhat the podcast is really geared toward pump users. At least that's what I think a lot of people think. And I think it's important for listeners and people in the Facebook group to understand that you can take everything that you say and you do and the success that you have and apply it to MDI long term. My daughter has no interest of using a pump. The deal is the Dexcom is a non-negotiable. We have to have that. But whether she gets on a pump or not is her decision. And she is holding out. And I think mostly it's because I want her to get a pump. because right now I am the pump pretty much. And it's just a battle of wills right now. She doesn't want it. She doesn't want anything attached to her body. She won't even try it. But yeah, like long-term MDI, it's hard, but you can have great success on it. And I think people get overwhelmed and think a pump's the answer. And I know people who have pumps and that pump wasn't the answer.
I have to tell you a couple of things here. So first of all, preach, because I am constantly hit by people who are like, hey, the podcast doesn't have any information about MDI in it. I'm like, the information's about insulin. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how you get it into your body. The ideas will work overwhelming. So I'm glad that you had that experience. I also think that you're probably 2, maybe 3 years away from her bringing home the scruffiest looking boy she can find to see if you will say, don't go out with him. So you're going to have to tell her how much you love him when she comes home with that kid.
Right.
Yeah.
Reverse psychology.
Oh my God. You're going to be like, oh no, he's awesome. Yeah. I can't wait can you bring him over again? I'd like to chat with him.
I like him more than I like you.
I swear to God, I'm thinking of leaving dad for this boy. Don't tell anybody. I know it's creepy. Now you want to lean hard the other direction when this happens. Mm-hmm. Definitely going to happen, by the way, because I could see her wanting to argue with you already. Just
oh, for sure.
Did you do this with your mom?
No, actually, I was looking back, I wasn't an arguer. I wasn't disrespectful. But back then it was different. Your parents they weren't over your shoulder all the time. I don't remember having a lot of points of contention with my mom. I just, did
like,
my
thing. My mom didn't even talk to me. How could I argue with her?
My mom worked afternoons. She was a nurse. So she worked afternoons forever. So like I would go to school from 8 to 3 and she went to work from 3 to 11. I would only see her like on weekends. It was great.
Take high five at the front door and then.
Right.
That was it. Oh, so you're kind of like a latchkey kid. Almost.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yep. But you're up your kids. You're with your kid all the time?
I wouldn't be, but diabetes, makes that a little more difficult than it would be if she didn't have diabetes.
Too much or do you think no?
Well, being MDI, I think I'm definitely a much more hover. I try not to bother her. I only text her when it's getting to the point of like, okay, I don't know if she did anything or not with this blood sugar number. I need to at least text and say, hey, do you see this? Mm-hmm. And usually she'll lie to me and be like, yeah, I fixed it. And then she comes home and she always throws her pen needles into her purse. And I'm like, why is there only one pen needle in here? This means this was lunch. Where's the correction you told me you did? So that's kind of how I catch her in that. But usually she handles it. And I try to stay out of her way, but she doesn't wake up at night. So I haven't slept in I shouldn't say I haven't slept, but several nights a week I'm up dealing with it, which is hard.
What do you think when you step back from this and you say, okay, in the short term, I feel like this is what we need to be doing. But when you step back and wonder about the long term, what are the things you worry about?
I worry about her losing her eyesight. I worry about her losing limbs. Like I worry about all those long-term complications. I worry about the highs more than I worry about the lows, honestly, because up until this point, she's good about treating her lows. Like when it happens, she's not waiting. She's dealing with it. The highs, I worry just for long-term effects.
What about like interpersonal? Do you have that? Do you have a concern, or am I introducing this concern to you? Do you have the concern that she'll be healthy, but we won't talk?
That's a great question. She recently started going to therapy because I've been noticing like we just argue a lot, and it's not always about diabetes. It's just if I say look up, she's like, I look down. Like she has to be opposite. And I kind of worry that like with medical trauma, like maybe this is part of it. And she went to her first therapy appointment and she came out and I said, how did it go? Because we do have a good relationship. I shouldn't make it sound like we don't. We do. And she's like, talked about you the whole hour. Like, great. I'm glad I'm paying for this.
That lady really helped me see what a bitch you are.
Exactly.
I tried to tell her you were just trying to be a good mom, but she said no. It sounds like your mom's horrible.
Well, so then I go back for the second appointment with her because I'm like, all right, go ahead. Talk shit to my face now, And of course she doesn't, but, the lady starts to ask her about her diabetes and she's like, my sister's a type 2, so I totally understand it. And then starts to give like advice. And I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
So we walk out. My daughter's like, we're not going back there. Like, I can't listen to her diabetes crap. I can't, Mom.
Isn't that something like, I'm not here for your personal stories. If you listen to Erica on the podcast talk, right? Like
she's amazing.
There's things you're supposed to be listening for, ideas you apply, questions you ask to move people in directions of thought. That's it. Like, you're not there to tell people about your type 2 sister, your cat that lost a fucking paw, or I didn't mean to curse, or sorry. But like, you're not there to tell your stories. Like you're there to facilitate the conversation.
Yeah. And I had to actually interrupt her at one point. And I'm like, we're really not here for diabetic advice. We have that handle. She has a good A1C. Her doctor is in no shape worried. She's like, well, if she would just get on a pump, it'd be so much easier. You'd have such better control. And I'm like, lady, you have no idea
I just
what
told
kind
you
of control we have.
About the good control we've already accomplished. Yeah, honey, it's not your podcast. It's a therapy session.
Right.
You want people to pontificate. Listen to me. I'll talk forever about shit that I think. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for, a good therapist is hard to find.
Yeah. I know. So we're switching. So we're in limbo right now waiting for a new one. This was just like 2 weeks ago that this happened. So we're going to try to go with our endocrinologist suggested, somebody in her office. So we're going to try there and see. I just need someone to understand diabetes, not to talk about it with her, but to know like that's a stressor and to understand what kind of stressor that is.
I have to tell you something. I am not a qualified mental health professional, but I think people should start sending me their kids to talk to. I think your kid would, I think just let her come on here and she could bitch about you for a little bit. And I'd tell her she's right and I'd tell her she's wrong and I'd tell her, nah, it would be the end of it. We'd be all good. Maybe we don't need therapy. Maybe we just need an honest friend who knows what the hell they're talking about a little bit. All right, that's my next job. I'm going to be what do they call it? What is that pretend job people have? Life coach. Yeah.
I knew exactly what you're going for there.
Yeah, I'm going to be, no offense to, well, I mean, I guess there's no way for me to say no offense to life coaches, but like, no offense.
Right.
Yeah, your common sense buddy, like a little doll that just tells you when you're being a shithead.
Right.
Yeah, I could do that. All right.
And she's also had some other medical trauma. So when she was diagnosed with type 1, we also found out she had Hashimoto's, of course. So she now takes Theresa for that. That goes well. But, I did a huge deep dive into type 1, and I feel like I know so much about it, but I kind of never really did a deep dive in Hashimoto's. So that's like my next thing. I've listened to all your podcast episodes on it, but I'm in a group online and they just talk about different foods they should eat and different, and I'm like, wow, maybe I really need to like get some more information on this. But at that point, my brain just couldn't like handle any more information. Yeah. And I forget about it. You take a pill and you're done.
I know. I could have Addie back on and she could really dig through it. But I have to tell you, I think it would get so far into the minutia of Hashimoto's. I don't know that people would follow it or listen.
And I sometimes think that that's why I haven't went further. Because when I start to, I'm like, oh, they're like the air matters, the wind matters. Like, how do you dial this down and figure out like what's affecting you as a person? So I just kind of washed my hands of it. She takes her pill. We get our blood work done every 6 months and we haven't thought too much about it. But she does also have that. So I wonder like, how's that playing into the teenage mood swings and the, all that kind of stuff. Her numbers are generally fine with that. We've had to do some adjustments with her tiercin, but not too much.
Yeah. Your story mimics mine. Like I have a daughter who has type 1 and takes tiercin as well. And, every time something gets said that's cross, you're like, is this hormones? Is this bad mood? Is this tired? Am I being a jerk? Like, is your thyroid did you skip your thyroid medication for 3 days? Is your blood sugar moving right now? Like, you can't possibly know all those things, so you do your best to keep things steady and then, then just assume that I'm being a jerk or she's being a jerk if somebody's having a problem. I mean, it's tough raising kids. I find myself recently more and more coming to the conclusion that one day, I mean, not that I didn't know this before, but it feels like it's getting closer now. Like there'll be a day where I just will not have any influence anymore. And then whoever she is right there, like, that's it. You know what I mean? Right. Like I did what I could do. Like Kelly did what she could do. And now she's going to go live her own life and she probably not going to ask us for our opinion ever again, or only if, things are upside down.
Yeah. It's scary to think about.
Yeah.
I'm also, some people, you think about like, oh, you were diagnosed when you were so young. And, I know your daughter was way younger than mine, but like, I think my daughter was diagnosed at a perfect time. She hadn't really become herself yet to where I could still I taught her everything I knew about insulin and I, tried to get everything down pat. If she would have been diagnosed at 13 versus 9, it would have been a way different story. I really feel for people who maybe were diagnosed in those really tough teenage years, because she would have been completely non-compliant if it happened right now. Mm-hmm. So I had a little bit of time to shape her and mold her before, being
Today was
bad
the first day you would have been in trouble.
Oh yeah, it would have been bad. It would have been bad.
There's an After Dark episode about the girl that had to go into a home, right? And then she's
Mhm.
pregnant. Her story is, to me, is like, it feels so much around what you're talking about, like timing,
Mhm.
and the things you can't impact. Like, it sounds like you're a really involved mom and you're trying really hard. It's awesome. Like that girl I just mentioned, she didn't have that kind of parents. And,
Yeah.
and just like that, like you don't get reasonable direction, catches you at the wrong time for whatever reason, a couple of those things pile on top of each other. And the next thing you know, you're having your own worst nightmare is happening to you.
Right.
And then it's hard for you or people like me or anybody else listening to think like, well, I don't want that to happen to my kid. And then you keep putting in these efforts everywhere. And you do I do wonder listening to you, like, will your daughter grow up being a person who understands her insulin, takes good care of it, keeps herself safe, has her health in line that way, but, has resentment towards how it got done? And is that maybe the cost of doing business? Like, I don't know. You know what I mean?
And I've thought about that and I thought, do I be her friend now and just relax on it, let her ride higher? I'm her mom, not her friend. My goal is for her body to be as close to non-diabetic as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So without being too overly crazy about it,
Yeah.
I don't really need to be her friend right now. I need to be her mom. And hopefully in the end, she'll realize that. She's got a really dark sense of humor. And like, she's very smart and very funny. Like people on the outside looking in would be like, man, you guys really go at it sometimes, but sometimes it's our love language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like we just quip back at each other. And at some point she'll go too far and I have to cut it off. Like, whoa, like stay in your lane. I'm still your mom.
Yeah.
That's just our relationship.
Right. Now, listen, I think not you, but everybody, we're walking a line, you know what I mean? And sometimes you stumble one side or the other, et cetera. But it sounds like you're doing a good job to me.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, please. I mean, I don't know.
But to add on the medical trauma, so let me fast forward then to last December. So December 2023, this just about a year ago. Everything had been pretty smooth for a while. Diabetes was going fine. She goes to a birthday party at Sky Zone. And of course, I don't stay. She's, 12 years old at this point. And I get a call maybe 20 minutes after I dropped her off of a screaming mother. You have to come now, quick. Lucy's hurt. Lucy's my daughter. Lucy's hurt. And I'm like, what? And she's like, come now, come now. And this person's nurse. This person is a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, is she okay? Yes, but get here quick. I drove. Luckily, didn't get too far. Drove there as fast as I can. My husband was with me. Get there. My daughter is laid out on the trampolines. She's at Sky Zone. And she has broke both of her legs.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah. And she's laying on a trampoline.
Give me a second. I know she broke her legs, but now I'm having trauma. Give me half a second.
Now, mind you, this is a school night out type thing. There was a birthday party, and then, of course, it's a Friday night, so there's tons of friends from school. So everybody has been cleared the trampolines. They're all staring at her.
Mm.
I beat the squad there, so they called EMS. They have her covered in a blanket. So I walk in. I step on the trampolines to go to her, and then they're all screaming at me, stop, don't move her. And because I'm stepping on the trampoline, it's like moving her body, And so I get off real quick. And they won't let me near her. I can only see her. She's about 10 feet away from me. And the other kid's mom, whose birthday party it was, is on the trampoline with her, like cradling her. And they have a blanket over her legs. And I look at the worker and I was like, is it out of her skin? And they're like, we think so.
Oh, my God.
And I'm like, what do you mean you think so?
What? Wait.
Well, she has pants on. It's hard to tell. I'm like, okay. I don't even know what's happening in my body at this point. I'm just, in a daze. And so they remove, the EMS gets there. They get her on a board and take her off. And I can see like her leg is just not the right way, the bottom of her leg. So she ended up breaking both her tibia and her fibula, completely cracked in half. Didn't come out of the skin though. But you could see it where it was about to come out of the skin. Sorry, no.
Almost compound. Wait, I don't understand.
Almost.
What happened?
So going back, and they won't let me see the tapes. That's apparently you can't ask for that as a customer to see their footage. It was sold out. If you've ever been to a Sky Zone, they get pretty packed. It was sold out. They had closed down an area for younger kids, so it forced the older kids to be more of them in an area. Well, one of her friends was on the same square as her and like double jumped her. So when my daughter was up in the air, the other girl bounced down. So when my daughter came down, the force of the trampoline was coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently it's pretty common. Like, sadly, it's common. But so she broke her right tibia and fibula, and actually she didn't break her left leg. She broke her left ankle. Mm-hmm. So the bone wasn't. So EMS gets there. They load her up. what really warmed my heart is the minute I walked in, the trampoline guy goes, I know she's a type 1 diabetic. She told me. And I've went over that a million times with her. Like, if you're ever not with me and somebody has to treat you medically, you need to say this. This is really important. So I was very proud of her at that moment.
Yeah.
And she's white as a ghost. She's not crying, but she is like, you can tell her body's in shock.
Mm-hmm.
So they get her on there. We hop in they want to take us to the nearest ER. And we have a lot of hospitals around us. And I'm like, no, I want to go the extra 10 miles and go to Children's Hospital. She's diabetic. That's where we need to go. So they kind of fought with me a little bit because they're like, well, that's not protocol or whatever. And I'm like, I don't care. That's where we're going. We get there and they do some x-rays. They tell me she's going to need surgery. Like, she needs a rod and screws put in this one leg. And I tell them that she's diabetic. And the next thing is, well, we're going to control that from here on out. And I was like, what? And they're like, well, you're not allowed to give any more insulin. You can't give her anything from home. Like, if you have insulin pens with you, we can't use them. And I was like, well, she's independent. If you could just call, and because we're at the same hospital that she was diagnosed with type 1 at, and we have a great relationship with our endo. I was like, call the endo office. Like, they'll tell you, like, we're cool. Like, you don't need to, like, harp on us about this. Apparently, hospital policy is once they're admitted, I am stripped of every right I have. They're wanting to take her Dexcom off. They're not letting me give insulin. That was very scary for me. And that's the ER. So I thought, okay, it'll get better once they get on the phone and get the right people, whatever. So we get admitted. We're up in the room. It's the evening, the night before surgery. And, she's like 300. I'm like, hey, she needs some insulin, man. Like, I understand, like, her body's going through shock and her sugar is going to jump. But, like, we've been there now for a minute. Like, she needs some insulin. And they're like, okay, well, we'll call, we're going to put her on a sliding scale. And we don't really correct unless it's, mealtime. And I'm like, well, that's not how we operate. Like, she's not used to feeling 300. Like, this is odd for her. They talked about it and they came back and said, we've decided we're not going to give her any insulin because she has surgery in the morning. At that point, I was like, oh my God, it's happening. Like, this is happening to me. I've been stripped of my rights and they don't know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. So
the first night we suffered it out. In the morning, I asked to speak to the endocrinologist, and one came in it's like a group of like 10. So we don't see this woman, but she came in and, she was very pleasant and very well spoken and explained that it's okay to be 300 and she's in a lot of pain. And I said, yes, but she's also going to have to heal from surgery later today. Like, she doesn't need to be 300. Well, we'd rather have her 300 going into surgery. And that just blew my mind.
What about 200?
Right. Like, I wouldn't even be happy with 200.
Yeah, but I mean, can we meet in the middle? Yeah,
right. Right.
Yeah.
So that was when it kind of hit me like, oh, this is going to be a fight. This is going to be a big fight. So she had surgery. She came down a little bit before surgery and she stayed steady while she was in there, but she was still much higher than I would have liked. And then afterwards I thought, okay, we're going to take back control. And I asked to speak to the endocrinologist again. And she's like, no, I'm sorry. While she's admitted, you don't have any right to give her insulin. And that just really stopped me in my tracks. I was like, it scared me, like, in the future, if I'm not here to fight for her, and I'm losing this fight, but at least I'm fighting, is she going to know how to navigate this kind of situation on her own? And I thought, well, this is a time where I need to show her, like, they're not always right. And I know that sounds terrible because I really do trust the medical profession. I do. Like, my mom's a nurse, my sister's a nurse practitioner. Like, I do have faith in the medical community, but at this moment I thought I need to teach her that they're not always right and that your body and, we have to manage this disease. So I talked to them again and they started to agree to correct every 3 hours. So I thought that's a start. Well, that whole day she rode high. And then when meals would come, they do this thing where two people have to look at the insulin pen or syringe, whatever they were using. Her food would come, I'd ring the buzzer. The nurse would take 10 minutes to come in. And then she'd be like, okay, and this will be, 10 units or whatever. And then she'd be like, I have to get a second pair of eyes on the needle before I can inject. So her food's ice cold. We're 20 minutes in. She's starving. And we're waiting for a second. And I said, can I be the second person that looks at the pen? No, you can't be it. I'm like, oh my gosh. So it just went downhill. We were in the hospital for 3 days with that. And I ended up just giving injections when they weren't in the room.
Oh.
I had to. I mean, it was at the
Theresa,
point where
I think that's what most people end up doing. But
yeah. So then we have our next endo appointment, and we never got to see like our endo while she was there because she wasn't the one on call. And she told me when we went to our next appointment was like, next time that happens, just message me personally and I'll make sure to take care of it. And that made me feel a little better. But then we wanted to change some stuff when she went to camp this past year. And this is after the broken legs. And the endo fought me on it. Like, she didn't want to change like her correction factor and things like that. Like, we were looking at camp, and she kind of said, you have to do what the school nurse says. And I was like, boy, to my face, you tell me, oh yeah, just call me. But then when we need you, like, you revert back to, well, this is policy. This is how we do it. And that to me is very frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's pretty common as well.
It's sad.
Yeah. Also, you fought to go to that hospital.
I know. I paid extra to go there.
You were probably like, damn it, I picked the wrong one. It is not an uncommon story to get into a hospital. They don't know what they're doing, and your diabetes is not actually their concern. That's what you learn, is that the legs were their concern. They apparently can't be concerned with two things at one time.
Well, and I asked my endo, I'm like, can't we put something in her chart that, like, if we're not admitted for something diabetic related, let's just not talk about it. You know, like, because we're not there for that. If I was there and she's in DKA, of course, by all means, help me out. But if we're there for something random, why is her diabetes even a question?
Yeah. I know I've had friends in the hospital with type 1, and they just get somebody to bring them their stuff, and they hide it in the room and take care of themselves.
But how sad is that? You know, like, I'm typically a rule follower, so I don't like to go around the rules or bend the rules, but in this instance, it was absolutely absurd. And you just felt like you were talking to a wall. You know, it was like you weren't getting anywhere. They were just like, sorry, this is how we're going to do it.
Please don't look at me with your dead eyes and tell me there's nothing you can do.
You know, and they were all pleasant. They were nice about it, but it just, I know and then I have to like check myself, because I'm like, are they looking at me like I'm crazy? Because then they would say, you are too worried about her numbers. Like, you don't need to be that worried. And I'm like, oh my God, they think I'm crazy. Are they going to like put a complaint in that like I'm, you know, treating my kid inappropriately with diabetes? Like, then that fear set in of like, okay, don't look crazy. Just go with it.
Don't. No one's ever not looked crazy trying not to look crazy, by the way.
Probably. There was a lot happening. It was just a rough few days. And then she was stuck in a wheelchair for almost 4 months as her surgery healed. So that was really tough, you know, figuring out, you know, she was so much less active.
I mean, did they look later at her legs? Was this like a genetic thing? Was it structural, or is it just the force from the trampoline?
I asked that because I was worried about like her calcium or, you know, something like that. And they did a bone, during the surgery. And the ortho said that, no, it was the force of impact. He's like, wrong time, wrong place.
That sucks.
And, you know, he's like, was this a playground accident or trampoline? I'm like, trampoline. He's like, those are the only 2 broken legs we get in here with kids. I'm like, oh, interesting. He's like, I would never take my kids to Sky Zone. Sorry, Sky Zone.
Is she athletic?
Not really, but we do, like, she doesn't play like sports, but she's pretty active outside. Like, we have a pool, we have a trampoline, she's running around all the time, but not like workout athletic.
I just wondered, like, trust me, I'm not blaming her, but like, if I put like a super athletic person in that same situation, like, do you think they would have rolled with it better or fought it, like not fought it? You know what I mean? Like, sometimes there are people just more in control of their bodies. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
yeah, it does. Like, could she have landed better? Could she have seen that impact coming or absorbed it better with her legs? I don't know. I mean, we have a trampoline at home, so she's no stranger to like how the bounce feels, if that makes sense.
Right.
But those trampolines are so much more
powerful.
Taut.
Yeah.
You know, thick within our backyard, $150, you know, trampoline. Yeah. Which we don't have anymore, by the way.
Oh my God.
She was really mad at me when I gave that away.
Gave it away, set it on fire. Oh, that's crazy. And then how about her blood sugars through the healing process?
So through the healing process, she was pretty much fine. She developed some really bad like blood blisters from the medical tape, which were probably the hardest part of healing, because they were so sore. And I really worried about, like, is she not healing better because she's diabetic? But, you know, we have a good A1C. Like, I think her last A1C was 6.2, maybe. Mm-hmm. So I knew it probably wasn't anything diabetic related. The hardest part was getting the basal right with the lack of activity.
Okay.
And increasing that to a point to cover all that food with very little activity. But then she would have to, like, go to therapy, because she was in therapy like twice, physical therapy like twice a week. And then she would be low all night long because she had physical therapy that day.
And you had her basal was jacked up all day long too.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. to cover the inactivity.
Right.
That was the hardest thing was just figuring out like to being proactive to what the day was about to bring when she was laid up.
Yeah. And how is she doing now? Like, did she heal well?
She did. She's completely fine. She's released from any kind of medical thing. She can do anything she wants. And they said her leg will never break again. That leg will never break again. And it's stronger. What's really crazy, if you go back through my Facebook post, you'll see it because I posted it in the group. So you know how you have the two bones in your legs? Well, the bigger one is the one that they put the rod and then the screws in for, from the knee down, from the knee to the ankle. But the other bone, that's the smaller bone on the back of your leg, they just left it broken. They said she don't need it no more. It's literally in there broken. Isn't that weird?
That's making me upset.
They said eventually it will fuse back together like crooked, but she doesn't need it because she has the rod in there now.
Huh. It won't cause a problem later. It won't just grow to something or heal to something, or
they said no. They said it's.
They also
it's
didn't know anything about it. Diabetes. I just want to point that out.
They didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't.
So when she gets a tail in that leg, I think we know what's going to happen.
Right. And, she can feel the screws, which is really weird to me. Like she feels them in her ankle. And if she pulls her skin right, you can actually see the head of the screw, which is super creepy to me.
Oh.
Yeah.
How does she describe the experience and the pain? Does she remember the pain?
She said it was only painful when she had to move. So when somebody didn't move her, she was fine. But when we got home, I think that's when, of course, we live in like a split level home too. So there's stairs everywhere. Mm-hmm. So that was really trying of all of our bedrooms are upstairs with the bathroom. Well, of course, she didn't want to sit in her bed. So she wanted to come to the main floor to be in the living room or wherever. But then the bathroom required stairs. So pain level, I think just going up and trying to get up and down the steps was the worst, and getting in and out of the house.
Okay.
And I made her go to school. Looking back, she had a few weeks off. But they offered to do homeschool instruction. And I thought, no, she really needs the socialization. And looking back, I'm not sure if I made the right decision there because I think she was bullied a little bit. I don't even want to say bullied, just, picked on for being in a wheelchair because the other option was a walker. And she's like, Mom, they will kick a walker out from under me. There is no way I'm taking a walker to school.
Where the hell do you live?
She took the wheelchair. Right.
Where do you live? I just want to make sure I don't move there by mistake.
In Ohio. But it's middle school, know?
Yeah. Okay.
They're kids. She's like, I can't walk in a hallway with that walker. It won't work.
They'll kick it out from under me.
Yeah. She's like, they totally will.
Oh, my God. Well, listen, she did it, right? Is she okay?
Yeah. She's fine now.
Yeah, she's not talking about, I shouldn't have done that, or... Although she did go into that therapy session and talk about you for a while.
She did talk about me the whole time. I don't think it had much to do with broken legs, though, to be honest.
It'd be great if the whole thing was she made me go to school in a wheelchair. They said they'd send my work home, but no, my mom said I should go tough it out.
Walk it off.
Yeah. Quote unquote.
And that's totally the mom I am, though. I'm a teacher, so... suck it up, just do it. You're fine. You'll live through it. That's just kind of how we live. So, and she adapts well, and she likes school. So when her whole world was falling apart with these broken legs, I thought, I don't want to homeschool her and keep her away from the one thing that she actually misses. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
I take your point.
Just looking back, it was rough.
Listen, you know what I mean? Most of parenting is a coin flip. They didn't set her on fire. I think she's fine.
Exactly. She made it.
Yeah. Does she have a core of friends?
She does. She has a few friends that are real close, and they were real good to her, and they got to leave class early to help her carry her books. And so I think she enjoyed the attention for the most part. Amazingly enough, this happened in December. She was walking by April, maybe 5th or 6th. It was real early April. And once she was walking, it was almost like it just magically disappeared. Once she was upright and could bear the weight, she healed really fast.
Went quickly after that.
Very quickly.
Did you need any temporary accommodations to send her back to school?
I did. So I needed her leave class a little early for certain things. The nurse there, I worked for the school system for a couple years. I actually worked there while she was diagnosed. So I made real good friends with who I needed to. Mm-hmm. So I know the district nurse very well. So she was really cool about it. So they did everything they needed to do.
Okay, it wasn't tough. Towards the end here, unless you have something else you want to talk about, I'd like to pivot back to something you mentioned earlier. So I want to make sure you've had a chance to talk about the things that were on your mind first.
Sure, yeah.
You feel good?
I think the only other thing I wanted to talk about was now I work at a community college. I'm an instructor, and we do this summer program called Kids College. And it's really cool. Ages K to 6 come for us for a month in the summer, and we just do really cool things with them. I've spent all this time with diabetes and, I understand it so much. And anytime I meet someone with diabetes, I try to like educate them a little bit. But what really sticks with me is this kid's college. I had a parent reach out and said, hey, my daughter has type 1. She was only 8 years old when she first started coming. He said, every year we've reached out trying to see if it was okay for her to come. And each year we've been told no. I just wanted to reach out again to see if this year, if there's any change. And I was like, well, of course she can come. And they're like, what? I'm like, well, my daughter's type 1. I'll just meet up with her at lunch every day and I will help her dose. And she's on an Omnipod and a, G6. I said, I don't know that interface real well because my daughter's MDI, but I'd be happy to like follow her or whatever you want me to do. And these parents like were over the moon appreciative. They sent me flowers the first year. Like they said that their daughter has been turned away from every summer camp because she's type 1. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so sad.
Yeah. Well, it's nice of you to help.
It was. And it's really cool to care for her every summer. So this will be your third summer coming back. And I'm like, this is really cool. Just, sometimes our kids might not get to experience things, but, my knowledge of it is helped another family. And that was really cool.
Very nice. That's awesome. So I would like, if you wouldn't mind, to spend the last couple of minutes telling me how you adapted what you heard on the podcast to MDI.
So I started with, I didn't really go in order, but then once you kind of organize the pro tips, because you were still making pro tips when I really started diving in. Mm-hmm. So the pro tips were huge. They really, in a nutshell, taught me pretty much everything that I needed to know. In MDI, I just had to get out of that mindset of like, I don't know why she's high or I don't know why she's low. And I think everything started to fall apart or come together once I got the basal right. So I didn't really understand. They just told me when we left the hospital, take 9 units. That's all they told me. 9 units of, at that time, it was Lantus. And then we moved to Basaglar. Now we're on Tresiba, which is so much better. Just figuring out how much of an impact basal has throughout your day. Because I think we had it so wrong. Because from where I started, once I started listening with you, I think she was at maybe 10 units at that point. By the time I basal tested her and figured out her basal, she needed 17 units of basal.
Oh, okay.
So nothing was going right. And you used to say, like, if your basal ain't right, nothing's right. Mm-hmm. And that really stuck with me. Of, okay, this is where I have to start. This is my starting point. And it's not always easy to figure out your basal because the thing I hate most about MDI is I can't change it once it's in. Mm-hmm. So every morning when my daughter goes to school, she always yells at me because she'll be like, I don't know, 95. And she'll be leaving for school. And I'm like, here, you need 1.5 units. She's like, Mom, I'm 95. I'm like, I know what's about to happen. In an hour, you're going to be 140 if you don't take this 1.5 units. When I tell people that, they're like, oh my gosh, like, don't you get nervous about giving her that? And I'm like, no, because I know what's about to happen when she walks into school doors. And that's something else she always used to say is trust. I forget how you said it. Trust what will happen is what you think will happen or something.
The problem is the way I said it was very clunky, but what I ended up saying was trust that what you know is going to happen is going to happen.
And it does almost every day. I think it failed me once. She went low when she got to school, but Juicebox fixed it. So.
Adrenaline, like, nerves, that kind of stuff when you get to school. I did a talk with a bunch of kids in person a few months ago now. And I've said this on the podcast before, so I'll go over it really quickly. But one of them started talking about, I don't understand why my blood sugar just goes up at school. We talked about anxiety, pressure, stress, that kind of stuff. And then the entire group of kids was like, wait, that happens to me too. And then they all just kind of out loud, reinforced to each other that, oh gosh, I guess there's variables here that I don't know about. And
right. And learning from your podcast what all those variables were, because nobody was going to tell me that. No doctor was going to tell me. So sometimes at school, or if she gets called on in the middle of the class, her blood sugar could go up, or just figuring out all those variables and then trying to plan for them. Mm-hmm. And with MDI, I still feel reactive in a lot of ways, but I can also be proactive by giving her insulin before school, changing her basal rates if we know we're like going on vacation and we're going to be more active. But really that holding pattern of waiting for that basal to kind of kick in, I don't really understand. Why does it take 3 days for my change in Tresiba to catch up? Like, do you understand that?
Yeah. So, understand vaguely, be able to explain it technically, probably not, but that medication lasts, they say, longer than 24 hours in the system, right?
I guess, but then why do I give it every day?
Because there's a half-life. So it becomes less and less efficacious as the hours go on. So you basically have multiple injections of it, multiple boluses of it under the skin that are working at different rates at different times. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Like, so
sort of, but then I think about it more and I'm like, but if it's only good for, 36 hours or whatever, like it takes longer than 36 hours when I up it a couple units to show an effect.
Yeah, no, because
it's just weird.
Well, it is, but it isn't. Like, so when you inject your basal insulin at noon, let's just say it's at noon, it's not working at full power immediately, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So the first day you put it in at noon. I'm just using noon as a number. And it takes a number of hours before it's working at its full capacity. And then from there, it's diminishing returns as the minutes and hours go on. Mm-hmm. You're not at full power at the beginning. You're maybe at full power for some time in the middle, and it wanes as it goes away. It's waning. It's not completely gone by 24 hours, but you put it back in 24 hours from now. You don't have full power from the second injection, but you do have some left over from the first injection. And after you do a couple of revolutions like that, it starts to cover itself more completely. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. It just sucks because it's not very trackable.
No. And then you start to second guess yourself. Okay, was that the basal error or was that the mist on the food I tried to figure out or whatever?
Yeah.
So I feel like I just have to worry about it more than someone with a pump. And that's probably the hardest part of MDI. Besides getting that basal rate, it's just, I'm always aware nothing's going to work for me. I got to do all the work. So, and it definitely means a lot more injections,
Yeah.
I would say that I correct her a couple times a day outside of food, at least. Some days a lot, some days not that much, just because she'll eat more or less than I anticipated or whatever.
Yeah, but she wants that, correct?
She doesn't want a pump.
Right. Well, so she doesn't necessarily want the injections, but she accepts the injections to avoid a pump.
Yes.
Did she ever tell you why she doesn't want a pump?
That she doesn't want to wear anything on her body.
Okay.
And, we've got like the demo pod and stuff, so I could show her, like, it's really not that, it is. She just doesn't want it to be visible. She never wants it to be visible. So
not ready for that.
And I think that's her way of having control of this, of somewhat of the situation.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And, I'll do it as long as she wants me to. And like I said, she mostly manages, but I typically have to fix what she messes up. Mm-hmm. It's a pain when she decides that she wants a snack at 10:30 at night and she misses the correct, doesn't bolus for it right. And then, 2 a.m., that's when I'm getting out of bed hearing the high alarm.
Yeah. You're like, oh, good. Beep, beep. I'm coming.
Well, and then it's like I have to like drill her because I'm like, okay, what'd you eat? When'd you take it? It's because it's hard to manage with her because I don't have all the information.
Right.
When it's just me, I know what I gave, what she ate, and when. But with her, I'm like prying it out of her and she's half asleep. I'm like, what time did you eat the whatever you ate?
How many gummy bears?
Best guess. How many?
Squeeze my wrist if you ate these potato chips I'm looking at on the floor.
You know what's the worst is those stupid Takis.
Takis?
They're like this chip that's really popular with like the middle schoolers. They're this ungodly color of teal. Like you should definitely not put that in your body, but they're really big with that age group. Some kind of Mexican, like,
I don't know
chip.
it, but any teal chip sounds awesome.
Right, right. It can't be good for you. It cannot.
Teal.
She likes to snack on those, and we never seem to get those completely under control.
Are there any foods occurring naturally that are teal? I don't believe so.
No,
right?
It is totally not natural color. Just the dust from them, like I'll find it in my house, like she'll eat one and then touch a wall, and I see like teal fingerprints. I'm like, that's weird.
ChatGPT says that any natural teal foods would be blue-green algae, certain heirloom varieties of corn, turquoise dragon fruit, fiddlehead ferns, lightly cooked, seaweed varieties. There are some processed prepared foods like macaroons, candies. No, those are processed. Smoothies. No. Yeah. So fiddlehead ferns, if they're lightly cooked, dragon fruit, heirloom corn. These are teal. They don't mention your jam.
No Takis.
No.
You'll have to check them out sometime. I don't eat them.
I don't believe I'm going to, but thank you.
Yeah. I clean them off my walls. Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh my God. Okay. Well, I appreciate you doing this very much with me. This is a fantastic conversation. You're terrific at telling your story and your daughter's story. I look forward to the many, many situations where you have to call in probably a hostage negotiator to,
Right.
to help you have conversations with your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day when she's 37, when the day she comes to you and just under her breath as you're dying says, "Thanks, Mom."
I told her I was recording. She's like, "You're going to talk about me the whole hour, right?" And I'm like, "How's that feel?" After your therapy appointment a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
See?
listen, if you really want this to dig in, send me a $40 copay.
40, that's a steal.
Really? Am I not pretending to charge enough? How much should I be charging?
Well, right now we've met our deductible, so it's okay. But I told her, I said, we need to find a therapist or not, because when our deductible rolls over in January, I'm not paying. It's like $125 an hour.
Really?
Yeah.
To get the information about her type 2 cat or whatever she told her about?
Right. That's what we walked away with they also gave her like a book of feelings, like she was 5 years old.
A book of feelings?
Yeah. Like a way to like describe how you're feeling without having to say it. Like, like the emotion emojis or whatever. And I'm like, oh, God, we need a new therapist.
Oh, the book of feelings. $125 for that. I'll sell, by the way, I don't know what the book of feelings are, but I'll put together my own. I feel free to sell it to you for $45. Right. So yeah, I just want to be very, very fair about that. What is this? A literal book, core emotions, happiness, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, and surprise. Nuanced emotions like melancholy, joy, frustration, euphoria, and longing. Well, culture perspectives on feelings, expressions of feelings, tools for emotional health tips. Wow. Just stop rubbing your dusty fingers on the wall. Let's start there.
Exactly. Suck it up and do what you need to do.
Just rub your hands on your pants like a reasonable person.
Right. Lick your fingers like a normal human.
That's awesome. All right, Theresa, hold on for me 1 second. The podcast episode that you just enjoyed was sponsored by Eversense CGM. They make the Eversense 365. That thing lasts a whole year. One insertion every year? Come on. You probably feel like I'm messing with you, but I'm not. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. The podcast you just enjoyed was sponsored by Tandem Diabetes Care. Learn more about Tandem's newest automated insulin delivery system, Tandem Mobi with Control-IQ Plus technology at tandemdiabetes.com/juicebox. There are links in the show notes and links at juiceboxpodcast.com. Hey, thanks for listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate your loyalty and listenership. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. If you're living with type 1 diabetes, the After Dark collection from the Juicebox Podcast is the only place to hear the stories that no one else talks about. From drugs to depression, self-harm, trauma, addiction, and so much more. Go to juiceboxpodcast.com, up in the menu, and click on After Dark. There you'll see a full list of all of the After Dark episodes. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.